The What to Read Next podcast helps you build a TBR of future favorite books. In each episode, Lori and Maine interviews authors and book influencers to recommend books they loved for you to pick up today. If you're an avid reader, always looking for your next great read, then the show. Hi, Megan. Welcome to What to Read Next podcast.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for having me.
So happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, gosh. Well, I live in Western Massachusetts and I am a writer, and I started my own writing and editing business, I think, like 12 years ago now. It's called WordLift. And so I have a journalism background, but I became a sort of copywriter, freelance writer, and editor. And that's been my main gig for a long time. And it's also allowed me a lot of flexibility to write this novel, which took years to do. I have two young kids who are 4 and 7, a husband, a dog, 2 cats, a little library that I am obsessed about stocking, and like also kind of stalking to be like, what's left? Who took what? So that's a little bit about me.
I love this. So what was the process of writing fiction in comparison to copywriting and probably nonfiction? What was the process for you? What did it look like for you?
Yeah, so Super Bloom is my debut. It comes out May 2nd, and it took me 8 years from like starting it to publishing it. And I always thought I would write a nonfiction book instead. And it took me a while to gain the confidence that I had fiction in me, that I could write a book. I read a lot. I didn't see my voice in a lot of what I was reading. I was reading a lot of literary fiction, and it was great, but I was just like, I don't know if this is my voice. The book that kind of switched that for me is Where'd You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple. So funny, great writing, so clever. And I started to think maybe that's something I could do. I started taking writing classes and writing short stories, and then slowly kind of tiptoeing my way into this book. And the one way it sort of is similar to my journalism background is that I interviewed a lot of people. I interviewed a lot of massage. My character is a body worker. And so I interviewed a lot of massage therapists around what that really looks like. What's it like to work at a luxury spa? What are the things that you love about it? And what are the challenges? And there are a lot of really funny stories that come out of that as well. So that's kind of how they're similar.
I love this. And so how did you end up writing it? Like, did you outline it? Did you made it through a few drafts and then rewrote it?
Oh man. Yeah. I wrote a first draft and I had an editor, like a friend, someone I hired to do an editor assessment. And she was like, this is great, but here's the things you need to change and work on. And I did. And then I submitted it to agents and was like, this is going to be amazing. Someone's going to, I'm going to make some agent's day. And I heard nothing. I heard crickets. And I was like, okay, I think I have a lot to learn. I think I'm really naive in this. And I just began to really study novels, all different genres, began taking other writing courses, how to write a breakout novel, what the structures look like with really successful novels. Not that I have to do the exact same thing, but what makes it successful, looking at inciting incidents and that sort of thing. I don't love to outline. I'm definitely not a plotter. Maybe that's why it took me so long. I started forming writing groups. It's just an evolution over time of what I needed to do, what the book needed, what kind of feedback I was getting from people. And also, I was running my own business full time and raising 2 really young kids at the time. So it just took a long time to get there. And I definitely had moments where I almost gave up or set the book aside and set it down to just sort of heal from each round of rejection, because there was a lot along the way.
And I think that's a pretty common thing about writing is like there's a lot of like it's not linear. I think there's an expectation it's an overnight sensation, but the reality is that it takes like 20, 30, 40, 50 years sometimes to make that overnight sensation, moment.
Yeah, I think that first of all, we see an author coming out a debut and it seems like maybe they just are overnight. And also, we're regaled with all the overnight success stories of people, or like the 20-year-old who lands on the, Reese Book Club and she just wrote a draft, at college. And we're just like, oh. And so you kind of think like, if that doesn't happen to you, you're maybe not that talented. And so I had to really grapple with that. Like, maybe I'm just not that good. And for a while, I wasn't. And I'm still learning. I'm working on my second novel now. And I'm just each version just gets better and I get stronger. But I think I had to really kind of face that. Like, okay, thinking that you can kind of get a book published is like thinking you can be the best at anything, an athlete, anything, without practicing for many years. So I had to do that, and I had to really humble myself and then just grind for a long time. And maybe if you're a writer out there, I hope that is not your story. Maybe I hope you're the overnight success, but it is more rare than we think it is.
Yeah, it is. I'm a new 500 author, so I can tell you it's a pretty common thread. There's just it's a winding road. Sometimes you have to follow the crumbs, and like you get a lot of rejections. You get a lot of like basically not yet. Oh, maybe potentially keep going. And so it takes resiliency. It takes perseverance to publish a book.
It does. It really does.
So let's talk about Super Bloom. What is the elevator pitch?
So Super Bloom is about a massage therapist named Joan Johnston, and she works at a luxury spa in Vermont. She is grieving the loss of her love, Samuel, who died only 6 months into their epic courtship. It was just going to be such an awesome love story. And she's also about to get fired from her job at the spa. And then she has one chance to save her job, which is to get a glowing review from the most demanding client, famous romance novelist Carmen Brons. Carmen sweeps into town and actually gives Joan a task. She wants Joan to spy on the spa, where she wants to set her next bestseller. And in the wake of that, Joan begins to wonder if actually she should be the one to write that story.
Oh my gosh. It sounds so good. I think it sounds like a really inciting evidence and like incident. It's like, I'm about to get fired, but let me give this a try. And then be like, wait, there's another opportunity here.
Yeah, exactly. It was really I think one reason why I couldn't give up is because I just love these characters so much and I have spent so much time with them. So I really wanted them to meet the world, and I'm so glad they are. And my favorite books, which I know we'll get into, what to read next, but my favorite books are ones that are just so funny and so tender at the same time, and have you laughing one minute and maybe crying or just feeling all the feels in the next. And that's what my goal was with this book. I wanted to deliver that experience for people.
Oh, so exciting. All right. So what kind of books do you tend to read?
I read across genres, but except for something very scary. I just can't read horror. I can barely watch Stranger Things, which people are like, come on, it's too scary for me. So I read across. I love to study what other authors are doing and what's making them successful and what's working. So I usually have probably like 8 books scattered around my house and just picking them up here and there because life feels really busy right now. So I'm just dipping in and out of books all the time. But yeah, I like to read across and I like to read both, books that are just out and books that I there's been a ton of buzz, but I haven't got to yet, and things that have been like years that I still haven't read. So I'm just kind of always going in and out.
I love this. I love the fact you dive into some backlist titles because there's a gift about that. Sometimes we are so bombarded with a shiny object, like the latest releases. And then like sometimes you just need to go back to that good old, book from like yesteryear that was just from a favorite author.
Yes. And actually, I will say that one of my favorite backlist books that I've read recently, Lily King, who wrote Writers and Lovers, that was her most recent book, although she had a short story collection come out. She wrote a book called Euphoria, which I don't remember when it was published, but it was one of her backlist books. And I went back to it, and it was so good. It's literary fiction. It's beautiful. It's historical. It's got just everything. It's a love story. It's sexy. It's everything. And I was like, this is just such an accomplished book. So as we get into recommendations, that's definitely one of them that I hadn't thought of, but such a good book.
Oh my gosh, I love this. So let's talk some book recommendations. What do you recommend?
Oh my gosh. So as we talked about right before this started, every time I get asked this, I completely forget. But I have a little list so I can remember. But one of the books that I read recently that I loved was The Sweet Spot by Amy Pople. She is so funny. This is a rom-com. It's set in I think it's Brooklyn. And she it has just a hilarious cast of characters. She has a theater background, and so it almost feels like you're watching a play, and the dialogue and the witty banter is just so great. So I recommend Sweet Spot, Amy Pople. Super Bloom is being published by a new imprint called Zibby Books. And I'm going to recommend a fellow Zibby book author. Her name is Alicia Fernandez Miranda, and she wrote the book My What If Year. And this is a memoir. And basically at 40, she just had all the things you think you might be, gunning for in your life. And she was CEO of her own company, and things just did not feel right. And she decided to put life on hold and try 4 internships for jobs that she had kind of wanted to do when she was younger. And it just set her on a whole new path. And she is such a delight. It's hilarious. It's touching. It's inspiring. And she's a fantastic person. So that's a really fun, great read. Another one that I loved from last year is Julia Whalen's Thank You for Listening. If you might recognize her voice, or her voice definitely, and her name, because she's just an incredible audiobook narrator. And she just narrates, everyone who's incredible. Taylor Jenkins Reid, she just is doing everybody's books, and her voice is amazing. And she narrates her own audiobook. And this is also a rom-com. So funny, and it dives into the world of audiobook narrating, because she knows it so well, and her characters are audiobook narrators, and she does such a fantastic job. It's funny, it's sweet. I loved it. So that was great. I'm going to check my list here because now I'm already forgetting. Have you read any of those
I
three?
did. Thank You for Listening was like such a delight. Like it's an inside baseball conversation about romance audiobooks.
Yeah.
Because there's the world of audiobooks, which is it's a great world, but there's romance audiobooks is like it's intense. The fanatic, like they have conventions, they have places where the narrators come in, they have fan clubs. There's like favorite authors, favorite narrators, like like all this like authors and like, did you grab this narrator? Okay, we're gonna listen to this, just for the narrator alone. Like and so it was a great conversation about this audiobook narrator who was hesitant to go back to romance, even though she was a popular romance narrator. Like people were looking for her, and having this one last chance to have this, go back to it. So,
and I love books that bring you into a different world or profession and allow you to see, what are the little details that you don't know about. And I think it's like, she said, like, you eat green apple slices before you go on air because it clears your voice or your, the mucus in your mouth and nose, like it just like all those little things that you don't think about. And I tried to do that with Super Bloom as well. What are you not thinking about as you're getting a massage? What is it really like for your massage therapist? And so I love the like behind the scenes type of thing. Another book, I'm sure probably so many people in your audience have read this, and you likely have too, but it was just so good, was Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I loved that book. I also listened to that as an audiobook. I I think the voice of Marcellus the octopus was just incredibly well drawn, so funny. Again, a tender, really sweet story, but also laugh out loud funny at the same time. It just strikes that perfect balance, which I absolutely love. And then the last book that I'm reading now, I'm almost finished with, is I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. That book's everywhere, of course. She's such a master, and this book's so good. And it's set at a boarding school and in New Hampshire. And she goes back, the character Bodhi goes back. She went there as a young woman to teach a class on podcasting, and also begins to investigate the murder of her classmate while she's there, and asking a lot of a lot of questions about how we view sort of men at the time, relationships with men that were older. Is that there's a real feminist angle to it, and there's a lot of anger that I just love that she's grappling with and isn't shying away from. And it's really good, and it's also really propulsive. Like you want to find out what happens. There's a bit of a mystery there, and yet she's also asking some really deep, tough questions, which is really fun.
I love these recommendations, and I'm bumping the Rebecca Makkai book up, like, for sure.
It's really good. It's really good.
Such a good recommendation. So Megan, tell us where we can find you online.
I am at Meg Tady, Tady, on Instagram, and I'm at megantady.com.
Thank you, Megan, for being on the show.
Thank you, Laura. All right, see you later.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For a list of books mentioned and other book recommendations, please visit whattoreadnextblog.com. Thank you so much for listening, and happy reading.